Thank you. Welcome everyone to the remote special commission meeting of the Port of Olympia, July 6, 2021. The Port of Olympia is working diligently to address the threat posed by COVID-19 to Thurston County, the state of Washington, and the United States. On March 16, 2020, the commission adopted resolution 2020-03 authorizing certain emergency powers in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, including invoking applicable emergency exemptions to the meeting notice requirements and location restrictions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Pursuant to that resolution, the Port of Olympia Commission is conducting today's meeting remotely. The Port is following the guidance from Thurston County Health Department to take all efforts to prevent the spread of this virus and is acting in the interest of the safety and welfare of the public, the community, and our employees to limit its spread. We have an agenda. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved. You're muted, Commissioner Zeta.
Commissioner Downing, just point of information, your volume is still really low.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. I don't know what else to do. Is there a motion or second to the agenda? I'll second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have an agenda. First item on the agenda is West Bay Yard Development, and we have Mr. Troy Nichols of Phillips Burgess Government Relations, and Josh Goebel and Ron Thomas of the Thomas Architecture Studios. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you. I see Troy there. Troy, would you like to lead things off?
Sure, happy to do that, Mr. Chair. And members of the Port of Olympia Commission, thanks for the opportunity to present this project to you today called West Bay Yards. For the record, my name is Troy Nichols, Phillips Burgess Government Relations, and I have the privilege of heading up this public outreach effort on this important project and really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Brandon Smith and Ron Newman of the West Bay Development Group are going to develop the former Hardale property on West Bay Drive in Olympia. And I'm humbled to be part of this ambitious project. It's not only going to provide Olympia and Thurston County with much needed market rate housing and commercial space, but will also, over the construction phase of the project, supply more than $14 million in added state and local revenue, $1.4 million to the city of Olympia alone during construction, will necessitate over 700 local construction related jobs, will establish multiple public amenities and significant shoreline access for area residents along West Bay, and will also implement significant environmental shoreline restoration called for by the city's own 2014 Olympia West Bay Environmental Restoration Assessment Final Report, all while conforming or exceeding the requirements called for in the city of Olympia's current strict development standards, land use regulations, and environmental protection laws. We're excited that this private investment will not only provide approximately 10% of the total additional housing units called for in the city's current comprehensive plan for its downtown, but will also include significant public amenities, including a waterfront trail, dedicated esplanade that will allow for virtually unprecedented access along the waterfront, along with approximately 20,000 square feet of complementary retail, restaurant, and recreation uses. So it's also expected that the development of the project will lead to a net ecological benefit at the existing site and hopefully spur future economic revitalization and environmental cleanup in the surrounding areas. So as you probably already know, the Olympia City Council just this spring overwhelmingly approved a development agreement for the project, blocking in not only the existing stringent development rules, zoning requirements, and impact fees for a project of this magnitude, but also the ample public amenities and the environmental restoration called for in the developer's plans. Specific building permit applications and documentations, all of these supporting documents are on the city's webpage. So if you're looking for more detail, go to the city's website. You can just Google search for West Bay Yards and you'll have virtually anything that you want, more information you could possibly read about the project. So happy to be here today, and I'm happy to turn it over to Josh Goebel with Thomas Architecture Studios. He's going to give you kind of a detailed presentation with all the pretty pictures that you're just dying to see about the project. And along the way, please feel free to interrupt us, ask questions, make comments, because we're looking for your input and support. So again, appreciate the opportunity. And Mr. Chair, I will hand it over to you to turn it over to Josh so he can get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Troy, for that introduction. Josh, welcome to our meeting. I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Troy, and commissioners. Thank you very much, and staff also, for having us share this project with you guys today. Is my volume okay for everybody right now? Just some nods. Okay, wonderful. So my name is Josh Gold. I'm a project manager here at Thomas Architecture Studios, and lucky enough to be assigned to this project, which is really exciting. We have a team here on the West Bay Yards development group that is an impressive group of people. I think I've been able to work with some of these folks in the past and some of these folks for the first time. And a lot of them have worked on the 2016 study that the Port City and the tribes did on the whole West Bay restoration. So I kind of feel like we have the A team together here working through this project to try to bring it to fruition. If you go to the next slide, please. Brandon Smith brought this to our attention a few years ago now, as he was looking at potentially developing it. When a new client comes in your office and says, "Hey, I have this idea. I want to do a waterfront development on this old industrial site right on West Bay," you're like, "That's a great idea." And then luckily his ambition matched his excitement. So being a local guy who graduated from Thurston County or Tumwater High School, I think his overall approach to trying to bring these good livable communities that align with our city's comprehensive plan is exciting. And so we've had a wonderful time working with him through this. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. So you are all familiar with the location of this. These are just a couple aerial images of the site highlighted, the close proximity to downtown and directly across to the east, looking at the Port of Olympia. I think it's a really dynamic site. You get a lot of the kind of industrial character of the port moving in and out. There's a lot of dynamic movement moving through the port. It's an exciting place. And of course, it's right on West Bay Drive. It's not a long bike ride and a little bit longer walk into downtown. So it's pretty neat. If you could go ahead and advance, please. Here's the site, how it sits right now. So the site is rather disturbed, and there's really no ecological, economic, or recreational benefit that it's providing currently. And of course, the aesthetics of it is less than desirable with this kind of brownfield site that's sitting right on our waterfront. Go ahead. And the other thing that's really interesting about this site is the scale of it. We don't always have an opportunity to master plan a site of this scale. And you can see here some images of the site's footprint in yellow highlighted over some existing infrastructure around Olympia. So you see it over the campus lawn, you see it over the Isthmus area downtown, typical Olympia downtown blocks. It's about 3 downtown blocks. You can see it over the West Bay Park just to the south, and the farmers market area close to you folks, and of course some West Side residential blocks. Go ahead. And the other kind of the final thing of this site that is really, really exciting is the views to it. Not only are there views north across Bud Bay looking towards the Olympic Mountains, but you also have those great views to the east of Mount Rainier once you get up a little bit in elevation. And of course, that visual connection to downtown Olympia and visual connection to the port itself, all of which are these elements that we want to try to capture. Go ahead. And so with those views, there is, of course, view protection that's required with these sites. As with any parcel that's given to us here at TAS, one of the first things we look at is, okay, what are the constraints to the site? How can I turn those into opportunities? And one of the constraints of the site are, of course, the fact that it's on the water, and we really want to respect the views that waterfront property provides to us, movement past the property provides to us. And so looking at the Shoreline Master Plan and Olympia's municipal code, there is protection for views of Bud Inlet, views of Mount Rainier, Capitol Dome. And these are all protected through the creation of this waterfront esplanade. So we're allowing people to come all the way on the waterfront and work our way north to south, south to north, as well as providing access across an elevated plaza to those view corridors from West Bay Drive eastwards, right to the waterfront. And these public amenities help tie in the lack of view blockage by creating that east-west corridor that goes between them. And enhancing these waterfront trails, enhancing those viewing platforms, all those things provide, you know, an opportunity for the pedestrian to engage with that waterfront and capitalize on that views. So just to look at a few of those, if you go ahead and click view these, Tracy. The first view is, you know, viewing north out of the site, and then next view, go ahead and click, is viewing north as well. So you have kind of those different opportunities for viewing the waterfront to the north and viewing the Olympic Mountains. And go ahead, and then of course views back along the waterfront back towards the city of Olympia and of course the port across the side. And then one of the kind of little specific view language that you see in a lot of the codes and related to Shoreline Master Plan is where we have these roads that terminate, making sure that you can maintain those views at the termination of those roads. And an interesting condition of the site is we have the Woodard Trail that comes down right along from the hillside up above to the west down to West Bay Drive. And one of the things we wanted to do was align one of those east-west accesses between the buildings with that trail. So as people are coming down the trail, that lower image there on the right, you can actually see between the buildings and actually have a visual connection with the water. And there will be a pedestrian crossing there for people to get down and access the esplanade. Okay, please advance. So all those little elements, you put all those together and you start to get this, you know, master plan of what this site might look like. You start to get some orientations of buildings. And so what we have currently ended up with in our conceptual phase here is 5 buildings that are approximately 478 apartments, and that'll ebb and flow based on, you know, as we actually get into the specifics of the design of those apartment units and of those buildings. And, you know, we're making sure we have these tenant amenities. So we have a recreational facility, we have pools, we have meeting rooms, we have mailing office, all the stuff that you use on a day-to-day experience. But then we also want to create some destinations here. We want people to come to a waterfront restaurant. We want people to come sit at this plaza, have a cup of coffee, you know, watch the sailboats go by. And then, you know, then there's also some commercial space for the development itself. All this, it has to, of course, provide parking for people. So we have about 800 parking stalls on both the plaza level and below. And if you go ahead and click, you can see where the vehicle access points are. And so you have those on the left side of your screen there, you have the north and south arrows that actually provide ramps down below to 2 entrances that provide access to a lower level parking area. And then that central arrow is the main access to the plaza level. So this will be on grade with West Bay Drive, and it provides you to surface parking for all those kind of commercial uses. It provides you for surface parking for people to load and unload as they're moving in and out of apartments, for deliveries, for the, you know, the Amazon truck to come through. And so making sure that we have all that vehicle circulation appropriately placed.
Josh.
Yeah.
A question, since you said we could ask questions as you go along. So you're actually going to have parking below grade, and how do you safeguard against water intrusion because you're so close to the bay? You know,
yeah. So the whole site itself is elevated to about 17 feet, which is a foot above what we're planned for sea level rise. And so that, you know, the lower level parking is above current sea level rise planning by about a foot. Mm-hmm. And then if you click one more time, you can see, you know, not only do we provide this vehicular access, but we also want to provide pedestrian access. So these yellow arrows highlight those east-west connections from the sidewalks on West Bay Drive straight through to a set of stairs that will take you down to the waterfront esplanade, circulating north and south around the site. Thank you. So we talked about a little bit earlier about the West Bay restoration plan back in 2016. So as many of you are probably aware, the site has an interesting history that started, you know, back in the early 1900s, which slowly developed into an industrial site. It had industrial activity up until about 1996, where at that time, there was a fire, the building was demolished, there was a bunch of site remediation through 2010. And what we're kind of left with now is this just old brownfield that really does not have a lot of benefit for our community at all. And we have this like degraded shoreline with lots of invasive plant species. There's riprap, there's derelict concrete, metal and wood that's spread throughout the shoreline. there's really zero riparian habitat that has not much of any aquatic habitat at all. And the lack of that salt marsh and that aquatic vegetation eliminates, any foraging for juvenile fish species. And so it's really trying to figure out how we can enhance that shoreline. And with this development became forefront in how we approached it. And so referring back to that 2016 plan that was done by the city, the port, and the tribes to kind of ground us in how we were moving forward. And so these proposed enhancements of the shoreline are taken directly from that. And what we're looking to do is try to reestablish a lot of those shoreline zones. So you'll have, the riparian area that's going to have bird habitat. It's going to have habitat for small mammals. That vegetation will eventually filter into the water and help provide, food for foraging aquatic species. And then by removing a lot of that debris and those old metal beams and random wood chunks, we're going to be recreating that intertidal beach area and salt marsh area. So a lot of that habitat for juvenile salmonids and other foraging fish species in the area will start to get redeveloped. And so by doing this, the idea is that the improvements of that shoreline, one, will help, the overall restoration, and there'll be a large net increase in the ecological processes that are happening along that shoreline. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. This shows some conceptual images.
Could I ask a question about that last one?
Yeah.
Since Commissioner Downing pointed out that questions are invited during your presentation, is that correct?
Yes.
Great. If we could look at the last slide, please. So that's great that you're building on the 2016 plan with Olympia and the tribes to plan shoreline restoration. Can you tell us a little more about the role of the Squaxin Island tribe in designing your current plan?
Yeah, I could tell you that we've had Troy can speak to this as well. We've had one meeting with the Squaxin Island tribe early on to present them with the plan and get their feedback for it. And there's been follow-up conversations with them as well. Troy, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And thank you, Commissioner Zita, for asking that question. We've been in fairly regular contact with the Squaxin Island tribe on this project. As Josh mentioned, we had a specific meeting with them last summer, right as COVID was hitting. So it was via Zoom, like we're doing now. And then we've been in fairly regular contact. I know I've personally talked with Ray Peters of the Squaxin Island tribe, and we provided him and their natural resources staff with all of our submittals in terms of the building documents that are all on the webpage now, and invited their comments and feedback. So we've been in fairly regular contact with them since the beginning of this project.
Thanks. So here we have some artistic renderings of what these would look like. And these were done by our shoreline engineering team, who kind of, they took the information from the design of the different habitats and overlaid these on some existing photographs. And granted, these are, I didn't wait out there. I carefully walked across the mud flats when we had one of our record low tides here a couple of weeks ago and snapped these photographs so they could provide some character imagery of what the future may look like. And so at the top there, you see it kind of standing from up above. If you were on that Esplanade Plaza looking across that shoreline, instead of the riprap and those invasive species, we have a nicely sloping beach with some riparian vegetation. And then the image below is down on the low tide mark there, looking back towards that beach and seeing approximately what that grade would look like with some people recreating. And go to the next slide, you can see where here's some of those concrete derelict buildings and some wood and metal debris that's actually in the tidal zone that we're planning on having removed from the site. Okay. The other aspect of that, oh, sorry, Zita, did you have a question? I see your hand was there.
Yes. Have you tested the beach and the sediments for contamination, and what sort of cleanup as far as contaminants do you expect you're going to have to do?
You know, I would, would refer to some of the ecological documents that we have submitted with the city. There has been various testings primarily on, we did a phase 1 and phase 2 as the site. And then there's plans in place right now of kind of our approach to that improvement to the shoreline by the shoreline engineers, and everything's currently being reviewed.
The only thing that I would add, Josh, is that this has been certified as appropriate for residents by the Department of Ecology. And while their testing is ongoing, there have only been a few small spots that aren't necessarily a part of contamination, might be naturally occurring, and all those sites are listed in the documentation. But as far as we know, right now we're in pretty good shape in terms of environmental issues, and I don't think that it's, again, Christine Gregoire's Department of Ecology had signed off on the site, so I think we're in pretty good shape environmental wise.
Thanks for the initial background, Troy. Appreciate that. This image is just showing the improvements along the frontage of West Bay Drive. The 2016 study had various aspects, various street sections through West Bay. The one that was closest to our site shows the property stepping down towards the existing waterfront, but where the Hardell site is, it's a little different, whereas the site is being elevated to the street front. So you'll have a standard boulevard, standard sidewalks, standard bike lanes running down West Bay Drive, which will provide a little bit of relief for the pedestrians from the vehicular traffic that's running down there. Go ahead. So site phasing, this is a question that we get asked a lot. How is this project going to be held? So going to be developed. Our goal is to be breaking ground sometime next year. Of course, there's a large permit process that this project goes through. So the focus in doing so, and this is working with the City of Olympia and determining how the best way to phase this project of this scale, is phase 1. If you go ahead and click through these, it'll kind of highlight them. So phase 1 would be all the improvements south of building what we're calling 3. So this would be all of our shoreline improvements and all of our frontage improvements and the construction of that plaza deck with those 2 buildings on it. And so we kind of have from the middle of the project to the south that development process. And this starts with the shoreline improvements. And if you go ahead and click, you'll see phase 2, we come through and we complete all those shoreline or frontage improvements after we do buildings 4 and 5. And then the final phase, if you click, is just the last building on the very southern end, which is one of the smaller of all the buildings, and that'll be completed at the last phase. And this last image here, if we click to the next slide, or second to last image, shows something that Troy was mentioning earlier, is really the impact of this project. Back in June of 22, Thurston County did some modeling, and what they found is, over 700 jobs are going to be both directly and indirectly related with this project, and the labor income is in the large millions of dollars, $90 million of labor income, and the total economic output being that $276 million. This does create a lot of state and local taxes, and also some taxes at our city level. And all these economic models, they'll ebb and flow and change as we run them again, as the project gets more and more defined. Being in that concept design stage, submitting our documents for the first time for all the parties to review, we're going to be gaining a lot of feedback over the next couple of months here, and everything will be adjusted accordingly to make sure that we're aligning with our city's comprehensive plan as best we can. And the last slide is just some conceptual rendering images of what it could look like in the future here. Again, concept design. So I always scare when I show people 3-dimensional renderings at a concept level. Everyone, gets wedded to it, and they're like, "That's the one." Then it ends up evolving and changing as we fine tune things. So thank you very much, and we can entertain any questions now.
Well, thank you, Josh. Can you hear me okay, folks?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'd like to ask my fellow commissioners, do you have any questions of either Josh or Troy this afternoon?
I had one. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I had 2 questions. One you answered, which is, what is the debris you were talking about in there? And then you showed a picture of what you're going to be removing, which is great to get that out of there, as well as any piling that may be in that area. The other question I had is on one of them, you showed that red line that kind of circumvented the property. Is that the shoreline, or what does that red line represent?
Was that on our site plan potentially?
Yeah, I think it was, yes.
Let me click to it and I'll double check here. This is the first time I've given a presentation where I haven't had control digitally, so bear with me here. Let's see, the red line. The heavy red line was that existing kind of shoreline area.
Okay. That's what I wondered. It was the one with all the arrows on it.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay. That was it. I was just curious about that and the debris, but you answered that question, so thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. How about you, Commissioner Zeta? Go ahead.
I wonder if Commissioner McGregor's talking about that map with the traffic in one color and the pedestrian flow in another color. Could we look at that?
I believe that's slide 8. There you go. If you go to slide 8, I believe that's the one they're looking for. Yeah. Is that the one you're looking for, Zita?
Are those the red arrows you were talking about, Commissioner McGregor?
I was talking about that red line that circumvented the property. I just wondered what that was, what that represented.
Yeah, that was the approximate top of bank for the existing parcel.
So I'm glad to hear that you're going to have continued public access to the beach. And it sounds like you said it's going to be market rate housing, not affordable housing. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you have an idea about the average cost of the units?
I don't at this time, especially given we don't even have the final unit mix determined. It's very conceptual at this time, just kind of blocks the square footage of units as opposed to what the actual unit types are. Could
we be looking at $1 million units?
Well, they're rental apartments only. Currently there's no for sale project.
No condos, nothing for purchase.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta and Commissioner McGregor. Josh, I had a couple of questions. One is, up until this presentation, I didn't know the exact site layout, site plan, and I was dismayed that it didn't include that. Is that Hardell Steel? Is that building just to the south of you? So do you have any plan for that, or is that going to be, somewhat of an eyesore right next door to your brand new buildings and development and so forth?
Yeah, I mean that's I have lots of plans for it. I just need somebody to develop that. Yeah, it's a separate parcel owned by another ownership group. That's a pretty messy one as from what I understand. So, and there's that site has a whole litany of issues associated with it that at this point, we don't have anything planned for that site. I'd love to see that turned into something. I'd love to see some of the energy that this community has and focusing on its shoreline.
I see.
Turn that into something.
Mr. Chair, the only thing that I would add to that's a very good question. I think the best possibility of cleaning up that neighboring site and seeing something happen there is to develop West Bay Yards, because once you start some economic development activity, when you have residents there and members of the community coming to that area, they're going to not only look at that eyesore, but demand some sort of cleanup and restoration. But you can't get that without the catalyst of our current development plans going in next to the site. So I would opine that the best way to spur development of that derelict property is to do our development, and then the market will demand that we clean that up and do something with it next door.
It'd just be amazing, if you were walking south on our newly created Esplanade, not have to pop back up onto West Bay Drive, actually to circle around in front of that and be able to connect down to the West Bay Park down there just to the south of us. It'd be an amazing amenity in our community.
Well, I agree with you. I think it could be eventually down the road, a beautiful stretch of housing and landscape and so forth.
Yeah.
But my other big concern is what does the city have to say about traffic demand? Because I don't know the capacity of West Bay Drive, but you're going to be adding a lot of cars to the West Bay and to the bridge and the roundabouts and so forth. So, are you going to have to discuss that with the city as well?
Yeah, so as part of our application, we did a full traffic analysis, and there's a very long report full of statistics that we provided to the city, and there was many conversations prior to that. And it was really, one, establishing kind of that trip data of how many vehicles are going to be moving, up and down West Bay Drive, and because of this site. The interesting thing about West Bay Drive, we see there's no development in this location right now, so we all think there's going to be a lot of impact. That's our initial reaction to it. But the amount of housing that's developed, north of here, there's really not much else if you're driving up West Bay Drive, and there's other access points. And so the conversation with the city is, okay, we know there's going to be some more traffic, and that traffic is not terribly impactful to the volume that this street can handle. But what we're concerned with is how, with this more vehicular traffic, there's also more pedestrian traffic. And so how do we ensure that our pedestrians are safely moving along West Bay Drive and crossing from the Woodard Trail over to the plaza and then down to that Esplanade? And so a lot of the conversations have been around, okay, so we know that with the street can handle the number of increasing vehicles, how do we make sure that our pedestrians are safe? And so there's discussions about traffic calming measures, lighted crossings, elevated speed humps that are associated with the main vehicular entrances into the site. So it's once they determine that the street can handle it, the conversation has really been more of how do we do it best? How do we make it as safe as we can make it?
And the only thing that I would add to that is, there's some confusion about the development agreement process. That's not the end of the process. That's just the beginning. It sort of locks the rules and the requirements in place, but the developers still have to go through a traffic impact analysis, and then we'll have to mitigate any traffic impacts. And you would be surprised at how much you can do with, like, as Josh referenced, traffic calming measures, appropriate crossing, shoulders, signage, that sort of thing. So we will have to take that into account before we start the development of the project. We still have to go through that formal analysis and then come back with city staff telling us what we have to do on the site to mitigate those impacts.
Great. Any other questions of these two gentlemen presenting today, commissioners? Anything else?
No, I just want to thank him for making the presentation to help me understand it. And it's nice to see something that's laid fallow for years, since '96, when I was standing across watching the place burn down. And so it's nice to see something productive come out of it. So thank you.
Well, really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the invitation from all three of you. And if we can be of any further assistance, if you need more information, or if you'd like us to come back, I'm totally willing to volunteer Josh's time to come give you all the information you need. So whatever you need, just let us know, and we'd be happy to help out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you, Josh, and good luck. It's a gigantic project. I'm sure it'll have a very positive effect on the community, and good luck with that. So,
all right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, then moving on to our next agenda item, which is lot master planning. And visiting today is Michael Strub from the Lot Executive Director, and Matt Kennelly, Lot Assistant Executive Director. Welcome.
Thanks for having us. I think just waiting on Mike. I think just getting connected here. I know it jumped me off and jumped back on, so that probably happened to him too.
Right, Commissioner, if I might, while we're waiting for Mr. Strub to join us, I can fill in a bit that the lot staff and port staff have been in conversation for quite some time to discuss the lot master planning process and what their needs to accommodate their future growth are. And so felt that it was really time to bring this forward to the commission so that lot can bring you up to speed on where they are with their master planning process. And then we can open up the conversation between the two entities that have such a major presence down here at the north end of downtown, and as to how we can cooperate to accommodate these essential public facility while still keeping the mission and businesses of the port strong and healthy. So with that introduction, I see Mr. Stroop has joined us, and we'll turn the floor over to Mike and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. And yes, I have joined. I thought I had joined before, but I just wasn't there. So we are here today in the interest of just give you a little bit of background on lot. You know, it's always good to kind of, I think, refresh everyone's memory on what we do here. And also a little bit about our master planning process, as Sam said, and which sort of leads us to the ultimate interest here that we may have in some port property. So with that, Matt, so what is LOT? You know, LOT's a governmental nonprofit corporation, 501c3. Really, LOT started in 1976, but was redone in the late 1990s and early 2000 and became an independent corporation. Collaboration between 4 local governments, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. We currently have on our board Pete Kometz, the chair from Tumwater, and Cynthia Pratt from Lacey, Lisa Parsley from Olympia, and Commissioner Ty Mincer from Thurston County. So we have a service area of about 175,000. We have a sewer population of around 116,000 people, and about a septic population of about 55,000 within that. So roughly 68% sewer and 32% septic at the moment. We have a number of programs underway with our jurisdictions to convert more of the septic over to the sewer system. And so that will be changing over the upcoming years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, let him tell you a little bit about what we do and how we do it, and a little bit of how our master planning is going at the moment.
Thanks. So this aerial view probably looks very familiar to you, but as you're probably well aware, our Bud Inlet treatment plant is right downtown, and your neighbor here in downtown Olympia. Our average flow coming into the plant is about 12 million gallons per day. But because of the combined sewers that we have in downtown, we could get flows upwards of 50 or 60 million gallons per day. So it's rocking and rolling down here for sure when that's happening. We have the strictest treatment on Puget Sound, the most advanced, and it's called secondary standards in our industry. There's a diffuser pipe that heads out, just our outfall line heads through port property and then goes out a few hundred feet with some diffuser ports out into Bud Inlet. But what we don't send out that way, we can also produce into reclaimed water. It's about 1.5 million gallons per day of reclaimed water. The treatment process itself is a mixture of physical and biological processes. So what we're doing up front is removing things that would be detrimental to the biological process that we want to do right in the center in these green bubbles. And what we'd like to show you is just a few minutes long, but our outreach and education group put together this great video about how we treat wastewater and provide some good context to the discussion. So I'll share that video here and then take it back.
Just how do we clean the water that comes to the Bud Inlet treatment plant in Olympia? Well, here's the process in a nutshell. First, the dirty water arrives via a large underground 5-foot diameter influent pipe. Step 1, our headworks, where we take out the trash. Headworks, that is where we remove all the garbage from the wastewater. The incoming water runs like a river through big screens that filter out the trash, which then gets sent to the landfill. After we screen out the trash, the water flows through the grit chamber, where we get the smaller, heavier items out, aka the grit. Things like coffee grounds, eggshell bits, and dirt sink to the bottom of the chamber. Under the floor in this giant room is step 2 of the treatment process, known as the primary clarifiers. In the primary clarifiers, the water slows down and more waste settles out. The lighter stuff, the stuff that floats, are the fats, oil, and grease, called fog for short. The heavy material, yes, that's the poop, though we call it sludge at this point, will sink to the bottom. Long panels skim the bottom and top of the basins to remove the sludge and fog. Time for step 3. The next step in LOT's wastewater treatment is the biological process. In this step, we use 60,000 to 70,000 pounds of microbes that work at the plant around the clock to help clean the water. In these basins, we mimic nature by using bacteria to break down the waste and gobble up the nutrients. It is especially critical that we remove the nutrients from the water, especially nitrogen, which comes from human waste, food, and some soaps and detergents. If excess nutrients are released into Puget Sound, it can cause algae blooms. Then, when the algae die and decompose, the oxygen becomes depleted in the water, which can cause other aquatic plants and animals to die. That's why this biological treatment step is so important. Step 4, the secondary clarifiers. In these secondary clarifiers, we let the water be still again. Here, the bacteria clump together and sink, helping pull other suspended particles out of the water. These bacteria are collected, and some are sent back to the treatment process to be reused. Step 5. LOT uses ultraviolet UV light for disinfection. The ultraviolet light deactivates any bacteria or pathogens left in the water. Here you have it, the treated wastewater called final effluent that is ready to be released into Puget Sound. What you sent us when you flushed the toilet or drained the sink arrived here looking like this, and now leaves like this. This water has been treated to advanced secondary standards, the highest level of treatment currently provided at any wastewater treatment plant along Puget Sound. That's the process that protects our waters that takes place 24 hours a day, 365 days a year at the LOT Bud Inlet Treatment Plant.
That's a bit of a peek behind the curtain there at your neighbor right next door. Maybe some of it was more than you wanted to know, but at least you have a sense of what we do. I'll just share the screen back here.
That's a great presentation, you guys. That's terrific.
Thanks. We're excited to show off those videos. We have more on our website, but we just think they just did a great job with them, and it's better than we can say it in a few minutes. So thank you. So the resources, we get some resources from wastewater treatment. We have biosolids, that's comes off, that's the bacteria and sludge from our process. It's broken down, that's turned into a agricultural fertilizer type product that's applied in Eastern Washington on agricultural land. And then we take the gas off of our digestion process and we produce electricity and heat. And then we also produce reclaimed water, as I mentioned. We have a satellite facility as well out in Martin Way in Lacey that does that as well. So all of this started back in and guided by our wastewater resource management plan. And it was produced in 1998, a culmination of a lot of work. And then there were some years that followed for outreach. But essentially what we do is look at wastewater treatment as creating valuable resources. So how can we maximize benefits to the environment? How can we look for multiple community benefits as part of that? So our long-term strategy is to continue to discharge to Bud Inlet. We have a lot of those that combined sewers downtown that produces a lot of flow, but we're looking to expand reclaimed water where it's feasible. And we do detailed planning every year, just keeping up with this. It's an agreement with ecology that was created. So we call that the highly managed plan. But it's time for a plan update because it's been 20 plus years and we have completed some projects in the original guidance document. We have new projects that we're in scoping now. We're looking further at our treatment plant footprint. That's Bud Inlet Treatment Plant, the BITP. And as part of our update now, we're also looking, we own some properties And so we're looking at what should we surplus, what should we look to acquire. We also have a variety of planning efforts that happened since that original plan. So sea level rise, lot is participating in that with you at the port, as well as the city of Olympia. We have a reclaimed water infiltration study that we are doing to look at pharmaceuticals and personal care products and the fate and transport of those in our reclaimed water and treatment. We're doing a big upgrade to our biological process improvements project. It's like a 2.0 upgrade to biological treatment to stay ahead of the technology. And we've coordinated with your staff on that quite a bit. And then we have a hauled waste moratorium. That's the commercial waste coming in that really was affecting our process. But a big change also is population projections have changed. The conversion from septic to sewer are on a different path than they were envisioned back in 2000. Data analytics have improved quite a bit. There's permit changes coming down the line as well for Bud Inlet. There's a general permit that's going to be applied by ecology to treatment plants, but there's also a nutrient load limit going to be applied by ecology. And we have a lot of experience with our satellite reclaimed water facility and what that really takes to operate and maintain it. And folks are driving out there and maintaining it. And we found that focusing that treatment here at our Bud Inlet treatment plant is really the most economical for us. So some of the considerations that we're doing in master planning, when we look at what type of capacity does lot need, does our community need of our wastewater treatment plant as our population grows, we look at, okay, what are the restrictions at Bud Inlet? What are our needs? What is the timing? When we get hit with an acute event, somebody dumps something down the sewer, what kind of buffer do we need in order to handle that? We have seasonal limitations. When water is cold, it's harder to treat and remove those nutrients. We also have different permit limitations in the winter than we do in the summer. We've got a collection system to maintain and take a look at. The cities are responsible for the majority of that, but the main trunk sewers that come to lot, we're responsible for. We have regulatory constraints, as I mentioned before. Some of these, we've got a permit, but there's also a lot of changes happening with regard to those limits. And then stakeholder interests, anything from the Port of Olympia to our partner reclaimed water needs to the infiltration study. So there's a lot of things to take into account as we go into it. But one of the points we wanted to make to you today is that how critical Bud Inlet treatment plant really is, because although we have a satellite facility that produces reclaimed water, those solids, that sludge actually comes back down the line to Bud Inlet treatment plant. So the Bud Inlet treatment plant is just so critical to being the main part of our operation in so many ways. So we're showing you a preview of what our consultants shared with us, because this is kind of the heart of it and probably what you're most interested in seeing here today. So we're looking out to 2050 for our site planning. And what you see here on the screen is north is to the left, and our treatment plant outline is here in the dash with the two dots in the middle of it. And what Brown and Caldwell, our consultant, was doing is looking at, here's how flow and nutrients are going to change over time. Here's all of those constraints and those details that I showed you on the previous slide. Here's what you'll need at Bud Inlet treatment plant. In an ideal world, this is what we have to work with. So a couple things to point out on this map is the constrained nature of the site. So we're working within pretty defined boundaries. We don't have this large green space that some treatment plants have the ability to kind of build and grow and change the flow. So we're working with what we have. The other thing is that we know that in the future, as there's more peak storm events, that as flows increase, that we need a wet weather treatment facility. And what that'll look like is siphoning off a portion of the diluted flow in those high rain events, treating it, and then blending it back into the other processes of normal treatment. So that's an answer to how we can limit having to build larger and larger structures. We can still meet future permits with a wet weather treatment system. And that's a parcel that we own there in Washington Street. It's currently being used for construction staging for our big biological treatment plant upgrade. The other thing that we've identified and we've talked to port staff about is what's shown here on parcel A. And why that is needed for us in order to secure as part of our overall master planning is you see these circles here labeled 14. Those are secondary clarifiers. And what those do is after the biological treatment process has removed to a great extent nitrogen and the oxygen demand in wastewater, we need to allow the wastewater that material, that flow and material to settle out. So in a quiescent large tank, the clean water flows over the top and the solids settle out, and we recirculate those to allow those bacteria to do their job. Right now, a lot of times we operate all 4 of those. And in the future, the consultants identified you really need space for more of those. And if you look at the map and you see how constrained we are, you'd have trouble actually putting more circles there on the map. And that's what they identified. As far as a particular year, it all depends on how treatment progresses. With the new regulations coming down, I know the consultant has said that probably need it sooner than we anticipated, but what's important now is that we know we can grow if we need to. The other parcel that the consultant identified on the map is what your staff has referred to as the shark fin property, or here on parcel C. And that's a little further out for us, but we know that as regulations continue to increase and we need to remove more and more nitrogen, as our population in our community continues to move to town, we need to find a place to put the water. And at some point, how much can actually go out into Bud Inlet versus needing to develop higher level of treatment. And that treatment can be used in beneficial ways. But the consultant identified that as a piece of where we could have advanced treatment for the effluent water. So that's what's called out here. And I can come back to this slide here later if you have certain questions. So the master plan itself, we're kind of right here in the middle of 2021. So we're in overlap of our 2 phases because they're somewhat iterative. We're planning out our site plan for the Bud Inlet Treatment Plant while looking at what our capacity needs are for the future, reclaimed water supplies, those type of things. So what we're trying to do is get the phase 1 site plan wrapped up this year. And then what we can do is, as we go into our capacity into next year, we'll do public engagement and really pull in a lot of these other efforts that we're doing because it's a big, significant upgrade to our planning. So what the remainder of 2021 looks like is verifying and securing what the future of our property looks like at Bud Inlet and other properties we own, doing consultant workshops, completing our phase 1 and phase 2, and then doing board briefings. So that's our current plan.
Thank you, Matt. So, we got a long history of collaborating with the port. In fact, primary sedimentation basins there that you see on the bottom right-hand picture there, that was formerly port property. We acquired that. I think Commissioner McGregor probably remembers that. And that happened about, 7, 8, 9 years ago. We got that done. The property that we were talking about there, that's side by side of the property we're interested in, I think we bought that together with the port, both of those parcels from DFW back in, I think it's been 6 or 7 years. Commissioner McGregor, remember that. And of course, East Bay Public Plaza, which has become one of the icons of our downtown community. And even though everybody thinks the Hands-On Children Museum owns that, it's actually not. It's a lot facility, but we developed that with a lot of, it used to be port property, and then we took it over to develop the plaza in collaboration with the port and the city of Olympia. That's turned out to be just really a great amenity to the downtown area. We're working on sea level rise with the port and with the city. We've been collaborating with the port on the destination waterfront work that they're doing. And we've, Sam and I have had a number of conversations about the ultimate development of potentially some marine and technology education centers there, which has been a dream since we redeveloped East Bay, actually, a very long time. So it's been a long history, and this is just more of the same. We're neighbors and we're partners in the community, and I think this is just part of our planning now that we're trying to figure out where we're going and what we're going to be able to do in the future, which is why we are interested in some of this property. So with that, we'll stop and take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Mike, for that, and Matt for that presentation. Very impressive. And it really brings home, to me at least, the importance of our wastewater treatment. I mean, let's face it, this gigantic piece of land, and it's all flowing more or less downhill to that facility. So with that, I'd like to ask my fellow commissioners if they have any questions of either one of our panelists. Oh, I see. Commissioner McGregor, please go ahead with the nice hand up. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Great presentation. Love the video. It answers a lot of questions on how does this all happen from A to Z. And so I think you've done a good job on that. At one point you mentioned there's about 1 million gallons of recycled or reclaimed water. Reclaimed, I guess, is the proper term. And that is usually purple pipe type stuff. And do you see being able to reclaim more of that? And is there more demand than you have capacity at this point? Or do you see those kind of, that kind of growing at the same rate as what you have capacity? And how do you do that? So that was one question. I have about 6. So if you want to answer them as we go through, I don't want to dominate, but it's interesting stuff.
We'll take them one at a time, Commissioner McGregor. And the first question is, right now we have more demand for reclaimed water than we make. And so it's a question always of, in order to make reclaimed water, we have to have raw supplies. So out in Lacey, we're using every bit of water we make out there, and we're waiting to get more supply as Lacey grows. Down here at the lot, Bay Inlet treatment plant, where we also do reclaimed water, that water is all used up now. It's used by the port, by the city of Olympia in a couple parts, and by the city of Tumwater. Those of you that have been out to the park that we built with the city of Tumwater, and there's a storage facility out there of reclaimed water. So it's pretty clear to us that the more reclaimed water we can make, the more will be used in the community. And that's just a matter of, down here at the Bay Inlet treatment plant, it's a matter of space. We only have so much space and we can only make so much. And that shark fin property that you saw, we call it that. I suppose you have a different name for it. I don't know. But that facility is an additional reclaimed water facility in the future. I will also tell you that I believe that in the not very distant future, maybe in the next decade and a half, we'll probably be making potable water rather than reclaimed water. And I say that because it's just a one sort of short step from what we make now to potable water. The problem with reclaimed water is it's very expensive to convey and use because it requires a secondary system. You have to keep them all separate. If you go to potable water, you can combine them all in the same system, and it's actually makes it more cost effective. So those things are things we are considering in this master plan, and it'll be much more of our future.
So at some point in time, I can see with what you're proposing and what the staff is working on that we're going to have an executive session because I believe this would be an executive session type item to have. So I won't ask some of the questions I wanted to ask, but I'll save them for a later date. But is there a way to get a diagram of where your discharge pipes go into and how they go into Bay Inlet, where they go and that type of thing? I don't think I've ever seen one, and that might be of interest. So I'll just leave that up. You can send that over sometime. And what is the construction on Marine Drive that's going on now in relation to the screen that's up there, the slide?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because we've been working, with Len and Conley and making sure that we minimize impacts to port traffic. So what we're doing now when that biological process improvements upgrade is just here on number 8 and number 7, we're combining these 2 tanks and basically upgrading our biological process that's approaching 30 years old. So what we're doing, part of that, you see there's an 11 and 12 on this map. We're building a new building to house our aeration blower equipment and our mechanical electrical room. In order to build it, because it's so tight right there, we can't get a crane inside the plant. So what we've had to do is a Marine Drive is mobilize a crane. The contractor had to, and that's what required shutting down a portion of Marine Drive in limited ways. And we have these precast concrete panels in order to get it built as fast as possible. So the very last time of building that building is this Thursday, where we have to shut down and put the parapet walls around the top. And then when we do a pipeline lining, there's an 84-inch buried pipeline that we need to line that goes between the basins. There'd be one lane that would need to be shut down in the winter, spring 2022, 2023.
Thank you. I'll leave the rest for another time. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Commissioner McGregor, for those questions. Commissioner Zeta, do you have any thoughts or concerns or questions?
Well, I want to thank you for this presentation. Lot does terrific work, and your communications department does such a great job in explaining what you do, and so do both of you. So thanks for all that. It sounded like from what you said that you're thinking about not doing reclaimed water on Martin Way in the future and doing it all downtown. Is that right?
So yes, so to clarify, we're committed to the Martin Way plant. It's been meeting permit, doing great work. It's producing reclaimed water that's offsetting potable water supplies for Olympia and Lacey. So as flow continues to come into that plant, our plan is that we would expand that as flow come. Right now, we could produce more reclaimed water. You know, we could expand the plant if there was actually more flow coming in.
Okay.
So that plan is going to remain, and we're improving redundancy and all of that. But what we've learned, and to clarify my statement, what we've learned is that operating a satellite facility like that takes a certain amount of energy. And if we had more of those facilities dotted around our community, it takes more and more resources to keep going out, more pipeline, more, just a lot more of detail in order to maintain those. And so what we're learning is that Bud Inlet Treatment Plant is actually where we'd like to focus.
Right.
For the Martin Way plant, we're committed to that one for sure.
That's great. And population is rising so rapidly out there that you're likely to get more flow and you'll be able to use it.
Yeah, and the Lacey Olympia situation out there with recharging groundwater supplies, they'll take pretty much as we can provide. So it's a good partnership out there. That's
great. I was going to ask about recharging groundwater, and you are doing that out there. That's good to know. That's a great use for it. I just want to say that you're doing great work, and I support anything the port can do to help Lot as with your needed expansions. If you need parcels A and C, I think that Lot is the best use for that. And you provide a great service to the community and to our ecosystem for the whole region. I also want to mention that if you need a crane, we have a mobile crane that we don't use too much.
Thank you.
So thank you, Commissioner Zeta and McGregor, for those questions. I think I've got 4 questions, and so I'm going to ask all 4 questions, and then whoever wants to respond, that'd be great. On one of the slides, something called a hauled waste moratorium, and I didn't know what that was. So, and the second question is, pardon my ignorance, but where exactly is the Martin Way facility? And third question is, why is there a fence all around Lot? Chain link fence that went up 2 or 3 years ago. And then the last question is, roughly speaking, when might you need the shark fin parcel, or when might you approach us on that? Those are my 4 questions.
Well, I'll take the first 3. I'll let Matt have the 4th question. The first 3, the hauled waste moratorium was, for many years, Lot has allowed all of the septic haulers to come in and dump their hauled waste at our facility there. It's on Franklin Street. We, over the last few years, however, we've just had enormous difficulty as our loads have increased down here. We've had difficulty managing those flows and the way they come in, and often they have stuff in them that upsets our biological process, and it gets pretty ugly. In fact, we had a situation a few years ago where we didn't need permit as a result of that. After a lot of consideration, the board decided to shut down our availability to the commercial haulers. Now, we still take the hauled waste from our partner jurisdictions, the city of Olympia, the city of Lacey, and Tumwater, where they have step systems. So we do take that, but we stopped taking the commercial haul waste. There's other stations in the region that take that. So we stopped that, and that's helped our process quite a bit. So that's what that's all about. The Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant is on Martin Way. You know where you turn to go into the theaters out there, Commissioner?
Right. Okay.
Where Ecology is out there, just beyond that would be on the south side of the road there, just beyond the Ecology property. That's where the plant site is. But then it also consists of the Martin Way Pump Station, which is across from that shopping center right there on the left side or the north side of Martin Way. And then about a couple miles north east of that is the reclaimed water site, Hawks Prairie site, we call it. And there's we've created a 40-acre park out there that where we have the infiltration basins. That's become one of the top Audubon bird sites in the state, believe it or not. And so we have a nice trail out there. One of the things we try and do, just like you do, we try to make amenities wherever we have to build infrastructure in our community. We try and incorporate some public amenities into that. So that's all. The whole complex is what we call the Martin Way Hawks Prairie site. The third question, that the fencing, well, I don't think we have to talk too much about that. We were just having a lot of problems with encroachment on our property. There was a time there a couple of years ago where B Street was literally just packed with campers, and our grounds people were having to do an awful lot of unpleasant cleanup and dangerous needles and all sorts of drug paraphernalia, and then encountering individuals who were carrying on nefarious business over there was a danger to people. And so we put the fence up, and that eliminated quite a bit of it. Now we still have problems, and in fact, I'll tell you, lately we've had problems people just jumping the fences that we have and the gates and coming in to the plant. We had a golf cart. Literally, they came in, took one of our golf carts and drove it, opened the gate and drove it out. So they're getting bolder. It's getting more difficult all the time. And as a result of that, I will tell you that we are planning permanent fencing that will go all the way around the public plaza. It'll go in front of the lot administration building out front and all the way around. We already, of course, have some fencing on Franklin, but we'll have new fencing that will be more difficult to scale, and new gates. The fencing out around the public plaza in the front of our building will be the wrought iron, the nicer architectural fence. But it's just become extraordinarily difficult to manage our properties. I would also tell you our security costs have just tripled and quadrupled over the last 2 years, 3 years, roughly. So it's just a difficult, I mean, I think you have the same problems we do. It's just very difficult to manage. And so Matt, I'll let you take the last question there.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, the question about parcel C here, the shark fin, when we might need it. Just the short answer I'll say is probably not for 10 years. The tricky part about nailing down at the time period for this one is that if you see it's called out on the map as reclaimed water and advanced treatment. So like Mike was explaining, we know eventually things are going to trend more towards needing more reclaimed water, needing more advanced treatment, all the way to some type of potable water source. And so securing that piece means that as we go into this public involvement situation into next year, we want to make sure that we're going in with a plan that's good for 2050. And so that's why it's important to know whether or not that will be available to us. In the short term, we don't need to build reclaimed water and advanced treatment. The regulations or the community drivers aren't quite there, but we see them getting there. And so particularly with parcel C, I know that there's a lot of talk about uses and those type of things. So I think we could be creative with how maybe both needs need to be served in the interim, but maybe securing that we would know eventually that we have a good plan as we go out to the public. Does that answer your question?
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for that information. This whole presentation has been extremely enlightening. So,
Thanks for having us.
I just want to, if I may, note the importance of Lot's work in helping the cities convert septic to sewer. That is consistent with the city's master planning. It helps preserve our water resources and our water quality throughout Thurston County. I'm a farmer. We have septic on our property instead of sewer. And a lot of people say, I want to keep my septic because sewer hookups will be too expensive. But I tell you, replacing your septic if something goes wrong is a big expense. And I completely support the city's visions in converting septic to sewer as much as possible. And am very grateful that we have a facility like Lot to support those important conversions of septic to sewer. It's good for our whole county and for our waterways.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Well, I want to thank Mr. Strube and Mr. Kennelly for this presentation. I, for one, I feel way better. I just feel better about being associated with Lot now that I really know how you operate and some of the goals you're trying to achieve. It's very commendable, and I thank you for the job that you're doing. So if there's, I want to recognize our Executive Director, Sam.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. And I want to thank both Matt and Mike for joining us today. And we have been having staff-to-staff conversations for some time. And I think what Matt just mentioned is really making sure that we can continue to collaborate and put on our creative thinking hats, because while Lot has certain needs, the Port of Olympia has definitely land needs going forward, and as well as obligations. For example, we have obligations to some of our tenants for parking and maintaining that. We actually have needs for maintenance buildings, et cetera. But I really think that working together that we can address these, our respective needs, and then come up with creative solutions that we can, this is a very constrained site. It's going to become more and more dense over time. And so this kind of long range planning is really important. And I just want to make sure that the commission is aware that we're going to need some time, and particularly as we look to our 5-year planning process, that we're putting this on our radar screen, and then coming up with some agreements that will give Lot the certainty that they are looking for, but also incorporating and making sure that we are not boxing the Port of Olympia into a corner and not thinking about our future needs as well. So there's a lot to balance here, but I certainly appreciate the forthrightness that Lot and their staff has had with us. And I think with just a lot of collaboration and good design that we can address these together.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Well, thank you again, gentlemen. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our next topic. So we're going to say thank you again for visiting us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, our next item is ferry update, extended moorage agreement, and our own Lynn Fosher, Port Marine Terminal Director. Welcome, Lynn.
Good afternoon, Commission. It's great to be back here. I'm Len Fosher, proudly serving as your Marine Terminal Director. And just a mic check, can everybody hear me all right? All right, thank you. So I'm here to talk to you about the ferry update and our recent extension of a mortgage agreement with them. Next slide, please. So a little background. I know everybody knows this, but just for everybody's well-being, the ferry that's tied up to the marine terminal, it's the old Evergreen State. It's also the name The Dream. It arrived in Olympia in April of 2018. And it was here originally for 2 months. It extended off and other service agreements. Eventually, the port had to take some action for non-payment of dockage, and the vessel was arrested and then sold in auction in November of 2020. That time, there was a new owner named Bart Lamata who took ownership. So the sale price was $290,000. And this made the port financially whole as past dockage, the marshal's arrest, custodian fees, and insurance, as well as port legal fees, were paid off as part of that $290,000 payment. And until this recent labor that I'm talking about today, the port has been having this ferry on board on tariff terms. Next slide, please. So details on this service agreement that the ports move forward with is that the vessel is docked between berths 1 and 2 at the port's discretion. The term started on July 1st, will expire May 31st, 2022. The rate is at $17,000 per month, and that's plus leasehold excise tax on top of that. The owner had to put up a bond for $1 million as a component to make sure that we've got some other additional coverage. The total revenue expected for the duration of this term would be approximately $190,000. And the owner's current use and what the owner is looking to do is to convert this ferry into electrical power, basically looking to put batteries to power this vessel. Next slide, please. Some other details on the lay berth agreement is that we have insurance coverage that would include hull and machinery insurance, protection and indemnity insurance, pollution and environmental liability insurance, workers' comp, as well as marine general liability insurance. U.S. Coast Guard requirements for maintaining its operational permits. It also is month to month with mutual cancellations with 30-day notices from either party. All lines work of tying the vessel, untying the vessel, any cargo or moving batteries on and off the vessel would be done by longshore work. Any other expenses that aren't included in the terms of the lay berth are based off tariff terms. And this lay berth agreement was reviewed by Schwabe Williamson and Wyatt, who we've worked with in prior situations with the ferry as far as their expertise in maritime law. And with that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Thanks, Len. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments about what Len has presented?
I have a couple if I could.
Go ahead, Commissioner McGregor.
Thank you. Len, what happens if two vessels, we have, berth 3 is our primary log vessel where it ties up, but what if we have another opportunity for other cargo? The ferry will then move or shift deep into berth 1. And if they do that at their expense, of course, then why not just leave it in berth 1 after that move's happened? Just a question.
Well, thank you, Commissioner McGregor. And yes, we could do that as part of this move. We could leave it down at berth 1 if that makes the most sense for future cargo operations. But we've got the discretion to put it at either berth 1 or 2.
Okay. Well, I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Lamata out there on the dock when I was down several weeks ago, and he's got some exciting conceptual ideas on this, and I hope he's able to pull them off. And I know he's working hard on it, and he's philanthropic. Is that the correct? But in any event, he does have some wonderful ideas, and I know he's bringing people in to look at it and see what he can do to make it work. So I think it's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Commissioner McGregor. How about you, Commissioner Zede? Any questions of Len at this time?
Thanks, Mr. Fosher, for that presentation and for the update. I appreciate hearing the updated information, and I appreciate your good work on working with Mr. Lamata. We still need to do some work down there. Is it berth 1?
Yes, Commissioner Zita, I wasn't ready to talk in much more detail about that, but there is a project that we have on the commission, looking at what the commission might look at for next year as far as some berth 1 rehabilitation.
So how does the fact that berth 1 needs some rehabilitation, how does that impact Commissioner McGregor's suggestion that we berth this ferry at just berth 1 if we get more cargo opportunities for berth 2?
I think a big part of that, Commissioner, will be the timeline of when the cargo might come in. That second vessel may be a log vessel. If it's a log vessel, then it would have to be up on berth 2 as part of our settlement, as part of the WAP settlement that we had. So I think there's still some discretionary decisions. The one thing that I can assure you is that there's no issue with tying the vessel, having the vessel docked. Its heavy lift was a part of the components that we were looking at, and then long-term assurances of that dock as part of the capital project. But I'll certainly be able to prepare and talk more about that when that comes forward.
Thanks for your questions, Commissioners. Len, I just have to commend you. I've been asking behind the scenes for a bond for this vessel, and you're able to get one. And I see that your monthly mortgage fee is pretty handsome. So that's, I'm happy about that. I just in general happy all around. So I think you did a good job here managing the ferry situation. I'm not so much, we're not here to speculate. However, this ferry is turning into, you might say a conversation piece and perhaps something very meaningful. I do note that in I think it's called the Pacific Maritime magazine, where they talk about new ships and plans and so forth. They talk about the Washington State ferry system is actually converting with plans to convert 3 different ferries to electrical propulsion. So I think Mr. Lamata is right on track with what he's trying to do. And, I'm excited for him to pull this off and, see what the future holds for this ferry. But nice work. That's just what I want to say.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. If there are no other questions of Len, you're off the hook, and we're going to move on to our next topic. Thanks, Len.
Thank you.
Next topic is called On-Call Parliamentarian Contract, and Jerry Severe, our own Jerry Severe, is presenting. Jerry.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Bringing this back for a second time. We've talked about this all throughout the year pretty much. Next slide, please. A little bit of history. The Port Commission earlier in the year had a retreat where we talked about hiring a parliamentarian to attend the meetings. And I was asked to do some research in the possibility of hiring someone. I came back to the meeting in May with some options. And at that meeting, the commission had desired to hire someone local. And so we were tasked to go out and try to find someone local. I have not been successful in finding anyone local. I did reach out to, I think there's a association of parliamentarians for Washington State, but there are none listed for Thurston County. So still looking for that. I know Commissioner Zita had mentioned she might be able to find some resources, but to date has not been able to find anyone either. So next slide, please. So I'm just bringing this back, trying to close the door on this and ask for next steps and direction from the commission on how you'd like us to proceed. So just following up on that direction. And again, I had 3 parliamentarians that I had contacted back in May that are available. This contract was not budgeted by the commission since we talked about this in January after the budget had already been adopted. But the approximate cost was $150 an hour for any of the three that we would hire, estimating that our meetings would last 2 to 3 hours, and that would only be for the Monday night meetings. The contract annually would be about $10,800. And if we go to in person and ask them to travel, then that would increase it as well. Next slide, please. So again, just looking for direction. I'm not sure if the commission still feels the need to have a parliamentarian at our meetings or not, or if this is something that you want to just give us direction to drop at this time and wait and see. But again, we're just trying to check this off the list as it's an outstanding issue owed back to the commission. Next slide. So available to answer any questions from the commission.
Thank you, Jerry. Commissioners, do you have any questions of Jerry or comments? Please, I recognize Commissioner Zito.
Yeah, I want to thank staff for making an effort to find a parliamentarian. And I just want to check with fellow commissioners. We had originally directed staff that we would like to find a parliamentarian to assist us at our meetings. And when they didn't find one locally, we did ask staff to try to find one locally. Is this still seen as a need for the commission? Because I do have resources to share if the commission agrees that this is a need.
Commissioner McGregor, comments on that?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I don't know that we need to have a parliamentarian under contract. I think we're doing fine. I think we can move forward. But I just don't think we need to be wasting any more staff's time trying to locate someone. And so I'm not interested in moving forward in hiring a parliamentarian. Thank you.
Well, thanks, commissioners. Never did feel strongly about this. I do see the advantage. I do see also a complication, what with us having a discussion soon about going back to in-person meetings. So how can a out-of-town parliamentarian, monitor in-person meetings? However, it could be that the parliamentarian watches a tape of the meetings and gives us feedback for what went right or wrong. That's I guess how it might have to be were we to use a parliamentarian. But in general, I think that we've all made great strides in terms of how we conduct our meetings, and we have good, respectful, orderly conversations. And so I don't feel strongly about this myself. Commissioner Zita.
So I agree, Commissioner Downing. We have made progress on having more orderly and civil meetings. And at the same time, we identified that it could be useful to have a parliamentarian attending our meetings, not to give us feedback afterwards, but to resolve any questions of process that may come up during a meeting. And sometimes those questions do come up. It's great that all of us have received training on Robert's rules. And of course, none of us is an expert. And I think we're all committed to trying to have orderly meetings, and approving a parliamentarian to help us with that is part of that commitment. If we had someone local who could sit in and simply be available to resolve questions of parliamentary order, questions of Robert's rules, I think that would be a small investment in our commitment to orderly and civil meetings.
Thank you, Commissioner Zita. I'm anxious that first of all, Jerry, thank you for your work and for putting this presentation together. But I'm anxious that there's nobody that the staff can locate to act as a parliamentarian locally. So I have a hard time, as I say, that, I anticipate, I mean, well, I'm not gonna say what I anticipate, but I would say soon, we're gonna be going back to, in-person meetings. So I think that it would be difficult to have a parliamentarian present at a meeting when there's none available locally. So
I'd like to
I'm okay
just
with
I'd like to just remind the chair that I do have resources to share. In fact, there are local parliamentarians who are well respected in the community, and I would be happy to share those resources with you now.
Thanks, Commissioner Zeta. With all due respect, I've been to some local meetings lately, and things can get worse as opposed to better vis-a-vis our procedures. So I'm good with the status quo. And as I say, my position is that we've improved a lot, and we have a good conversation, differing views, but good conversation. So I'm pleased with how things are going. So I don't, see the need to pursue a parliamentarian any further under the situation.
Well, it appears that the answer to my question to the commission then is that even though we do have local trained and experienced parliamentarians available, the commission has changed its mind and no longer wishes to pursue having a local parliamentarian assist us at our meetings for orderly and civil discourse. Is that correct?
Well, thanks, Commissioner Zeta. I guess I would say that, it's always problematic for commissioners to do the legwork or staff work or what have you. And it's problematic for us to get involved in that process. And so I have to defer to, Jerry's thinking on this issue as the staff person, and that, she's examined local parliamentarians and finds none available. So I'm gonna, go with that.
If I understand staff correctly, they're asking the commission for guidance on this issue. And the guidance that I hear the commission giving is that despite the availability of local parliamentarians, we are not interested in having their assistance at our meeting.
If I could respond a little bit there too. I think it's perfectly okay for the commission to change its mind. I think it's perfectly okay. We asked originally, how much would it cost for a parliamentarian? And then we had a process to ask for what ones are available so that we had some information on which to base a decision. But I don't see now at this point that we need to have a parliamentarian under contract to attend our meetings unless they start to go really sideways, and we control whether those go sideways or not. So I don't think that we need to have staff waste any more resources or time, nor put a contract together at this point.
So I have 2 points for follow-up, since the commission appears to be giving clear direction to staff. And one is, if we do find a need for a parliamentarian, as Commissioner McGregor suggests, that we take advantage of the local resources that are available to us. And second, that whenever we have a potential hire at the port, that we advertise that position so that we get adequate response. The commission will recall that, for example, the webpage contract last year received only one response. So we have had some challenges with appropriately advertising positions, and I make those 2 recommendations to our commission. One, that we leave open the possibility of hiring a local parliamentarian, and 2, that we make a commitment to having an appropriate and open hiring process and advertise positions when they're available.
I'd like to respond to that, Commissioner Zeta. I have to reiterate, and I'm looking because I have my printed copy of today's meeting, and one of the bullets says that staff has not been successful in finding a local Thurston County parliamentarian despite research and outreach. So I'm going to go with that statement, and I'm going to try to ignore the fact that you're thinking that perhaps staff is doing an inadequate job in any area, because I think the job is more than adequate, and there's no local parliamentarians available, which is what we talked about. So it's perfectly appropriate for the commission to adapt to the present circumstances as we have done.
In fact, there are local parliamentarians available, and in fact, this job was not advertised. So I suggest if we have a need for a hire, we should make a commitment to publicizing that need so that we can get an adequate response. I hope the commission shares that commitment.
Might I add that if you have that information, you could pass it along to Jerry so that she can keep it in a file that should we decide later on to do something, she will have those contacts and then could check them out versus what a registered parliamentarian is required to have. And I imagine there's an association in this state that keeps them a list of those that are certified, or however that happens with a parliamentarian. So if you have that information, pass it along to Jerry. Can't hurt for her to keep it in the file.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to call on our executive director, and followed by Jerry has got her hand up as well.
If I might, Commissioner, I actually like Jerry to go first.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, as you recall at the last meeting in May, when you asked me to look for local parliamentarians, Commissioner Zita volunteered to assist me with that. I have reached out to her twice now asking if she has anyone. She has not responded. In fact, the last email I got from her said she has not been successful. So Commissioner Zita, by all means, if you have people, please submit them to us so that we have those for our record if and when the commission does want to move forward with this. And no, we did not advertise this. This would be a contracted position, not a staff position. So it's not been advertised as a staff position. But, you know, as we do all other staff positions, they are advertised.
Thank you, Executive Director Gibney.
Yes, and I'd just like to follow up on Jerry's point as well, and just make sure that we are keeping our terms and descriptions accurate, in that, you know, we were not directed to look for either contracted services or and a additional position. So that's what the, you know, and using the word hire would typically describe a additional whatever fraction of an FTE. Where we were to actually go to look to hire, we were looking for what those costs might be, and if they were to be available. I can assure you that you know, we can, you know, we'll use the appropriate methodology for either looking for contracted services or for employments. And it also strikes me as that is an operational issue that that you have a professional staff to conduct for you. And so really, I think the question before the commission is, what is the need of the commission? And it appears to me that you've reached a conclusion that you're not looking for the services of an outside parliamentarian at this point. So I think we've received the direction that we needed. So I think we can, you know, it's up to you, of course, Mr. Chair, but I think that we've received the direction that we were seeking today.
Good, Commissioner, or sorry, Executive Director Gibney. In summary, it's been received that that we have not found a local parliamentarian, and it'd be good to have a name in reserve such that if we have the need for a local parliamentarian, we want to utilize their services, we've got somebody to go to. But at the time being, steady issue, things are going pretty well. So thank you. Whoops. Okay, I'd like to move on to the last item, which is upcoming meeting topics, upcoming topics and agenda items. Sam Gibney, Executive Director, you're up.
Great. Thank you and good afternoon, commissioners. You can get on the next slide, please. So for this upcoming July 12th, we do have some things on the consent agenda, and as well as we have bringing back for an advisory, the 5-member commission ballot measure, a draft resolution for your consideration, as well as some other information about how cost, et cetera, how that can proceed. Then the consideration for adopting Juneteenth as a port holiday, a port paid holiday. And then we will be bringing for advisory a new market development agreement and interlocal agreement with the city of Tumwater. This is following on the direction from last fall to work with the city of Tumwater on a potential development agreement. So we'll be bringing that back to you as advisory on the 12th. Next slide. On Monday, the 19th, we do have some additional outside guests coming. The first is Puget Sound Energy Beyond Net Zero Carbon Strategy. And so we'll have their new governmental affairs liaison coming. We're also then bringing in Cynthia Weed, and you will likely recognize that name. She is the port's bond legal counsel, and she works in the area of municipal financing. As I think many of you are aware, the state of Washington just this past legislative session adopted some regulations for tax increment financing, and there are implications for that as far as ports and their levy rates. And so Cynthia really she's reaching out to a number of ports across Puget Sound and making sure that they understand those implications and perhaps things that could be characterized as unintended consequences. And then again, at the commission's request, we will be having the Washington Department of Enterprise Services come in and brief us on the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Draft EIS. That EIS was issued last week. The links are available. I believe that they have been posted to our webpage per your request. And so the EIS is out, and I actually have a hard copy sitting on my desk that I'm starting to dig into. Next slide. Then on the 26th, we'll be bringing back for action that resolution 2021-04, 5-member commission. Again, for action, the consideration of adopting Juneteenth as a port paid holiday. And then for action, the new market development agreement and interlocal agreement with the city of Tumwater. We'll then be bringing the airport master plan update. There's a briefing that is going to be happening. We will brief you here. Then as part of that briefing, and just to give you advance notice that Rudy and the planning group will be briefing the city of Tumwater on the next day. I believe it is the 27th, and then there is a public meeting a public works session being set as well. And again, Rudy will brief you during this item. The work session topics, you can see that we have made our way through a good portion of the list here. We still have contracting process discussion and port EDC bylaws. I do have those scheduled for later in the summer. And next slide. Then other items that the commission or staff have placed on the list remain to be scheduled. I do have these kind of tentatively scheduled in for the rest of the year. So I have them on the calendar, looking to fit them in. Of course, as we turn into the fall, we become very occupied with the budgeting process, but I'm trying to make sure that we have these on the calendar. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions. Yes, Commissioner Zia.
Thank you, Sam. I'd like to recognize, Commissioner Zita.
Thank you, Commissioner Downing. I'm just comparing the slides we just saw with the slides that were with the information that was on our agenda. And there were a few changes. I see that for our meeting on July 12th, next week, several items have been added,
Mhm.
including I'm sorry. Okay, several items have been added, including 2 new consent items. There are now 3 consent items, commercial, all dealing with real estate, 2 dealing with Panettone. And Panettone, of course, has been a very controversial subject. We've got a lot of public input, and I am glad to see that the Panettone items, new market lease stuff is coming to us. Some of it is coming to us as advisory before action in later meetings. These consent agreements on new market lease option amendment and new market ground lease form approval, I think consent is premature. Commissioners have not been briefed on this. The public is very concerned about this. And as I understand it, the executive director will be briefing Tumwater City Council on these matters, though the Port Commission has yet to be briefed. So consent is premature. These should be advisory.
Thank you for that input, Commissioner Zita. I will tell you that I have consulted with the chair and believe that that is appropriate for them to be placed on the consent agenda. The 2 items that you're speaking of are really matters at pretty much as to form. The actual items of content that will be included in the briefing and for advisory. And so as you are aware, any particular commissioner can move to remove something from the consent agenda and place it on as a regular item, and you can do so at that meeting. But at this point, staff and the chair plan to leave those on as consent items. Again, they are very, very perfunctory and really as to form. And we will be briefing the City of Tumwater Council immediately following, and we have worked with Tumwater City staff on this. So we will be briefing the Port Commission first on the 12th, and then we will be briefing the City of Tumwater in a work session on the 13th.
So just for clarification, my comments were directed to the Port Commission. I am suggesting to the Port Commission that because these are delicate matters, controversial matters, that this commission has yet to be briefed on, these matters should not be on the consent calendar. They should be on the advisory calendar.
Well, I can respond to that, Commissioner Zita. Since Sam did say she conferred with me about this, and in fact she did. So I'm looking at this new market lease option amendment. So it's an amendment as to the form of the lease. It will be in your packet. I guess the packet's going out either today or tomorrow. And so it will be in your packet, and take a look at it. If you have any problems with it, please come to the meeting and make a motion accordingly at the beginning, where we typically address the agenda for the evening and what falls in which category.
I am expressing my concern now about this process, and I would like to know whether or not Commissioner McGregor shares my concern that we have put a delicate and controversial item on our consent calendar with no prior briefing of the commission. Commissioner McGregor.
Well, which one are you exactly talking about, Commissioner Zita? Because the new market lease option amendment, I'm assuming there must be some dates in there that need to be updated. I don't know. But it's an amendment to the existing lease. I don't know, commercial installation lease assignment is a pretty perfunctory operation of staff that something is being assigned to another individual, whether they're buying the company or whatever. That's pretty normal operation. So I'm not sure exactly what, but I'm comfortable if the chair is putting it where it is on the agenda, then I'm comfortable with leaving it there. So thank you.
So I hear that 2 commissioners are unconcerned about putting these delicate and controversial items on a consent calendar for approval with no public comment.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Zita, for paraphrasing the minds of your fellow commissioners. However, as I stated, I'll state it again. The reason why we put the packet out the week before is so the public and commissioners and staff can study the packet and have a understanding of it going into the meeting. So I urge you to read the packet, study the proposed new market lease option amendment, which is an amendment I understand as to form. And if you have an objection, please bring it to the beginning of the July 12th meeting, and we'll take it up at that time.
And I urge my fellow commissioners to reconsider putting this on the consent calendar now during this discussion, because the public will not have an opportunity to comment on these matters. Maybe you don't want to hear public comment on these matters because we got hundreds and hundreds of public comments concerned about these very matters a year ago. If you do care about giving the public adequate opportunity to review and comment on our decisions, this should be removed from the consent calendar and put on advisory.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. Commissioner McGregor, did you have any questions about our executive director's presentation about upcoming topics?
No, I don't. I think that you're exactly right. I don't know what the new market lease option amendment is, but when I get the packet, I'll be sure to read it and see what it involves. Normally, those are pretty perfunctory type of items that are brought in consent, just like bills and vouchers and everything else. So I'll wait till I get the packet before I make any assumptions.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Sam. I don't have any questions as to the upcoming topics, but again, for purposes of transparency and clarity, I appreciate you making this a regular presentation for us, so we know what's coming down the pike. Thank you.
I do have one more question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Zeta.
It appears that the crane analysis has been removed from a future meeting, and there are 2 points I'd like to check in with fellow commissioners about. First of all, at our previous meetings, we clarified to staff that this is not to be a presentation on crane analysis, but a discussion about possible action stemming from the crane analysis. And then the next point, of course, is that it should not be dropped from the agenda.
Thanks, Commissioner Zeta. So what I hear you saying is crane analysis is not really crane analysis, but future of the crane for commission consideration.
Commissioner,
That's what we agreed at
after the last workshop, I did go back and listen to the, I believe it was the majority of the commission said that they did not want any additional follow-up on this. So this was at the commission direction that we removed this from the upcoming topics and ones that we were still. So I believe there's Commissioners Downing and McGregor said that they didn't wish to have any additional follow-up.
So I'm checking in with my fellow commissioners. Is it the wish of the commission that we not follow up on the crane analysis that showed that the crane is losing a lot of money? We don't want to follow up and consider possible actions?
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta, and thank you, Sam, for that clarification. I do believe you're correct that the majority of the commission has decided that crane analysis or future of the crane is not on the near-term topic. It doesn't mean we won't revisit it in the future, but it's not on the near-term work session topic list. Am I correct, Commissioner McGregor?
You are correct. We had a discussion on that and decided we didn't need to have any further discussion on that at this point.
Good. I'd like to close this topic then and bring this meeting to a close if there are no other comments about anything. Good. Okay. I think we're through our topics for today. Great meeting, very interesting material, and I thank you for your participation, commissioners and port staff. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you. See you next Monday.